Hello and welcome. The Detroit Regional Chamber is delighted to welcome you to this very special webinar hosted by the Chamber. AI, Misinformation, and Business, Navigating the 2024 Elections. Today's event features two nationally recognized leaders who are leading the fight to combat misinformation, disinformation, and falsehoods in our public domain, especially as it relates to our upcoming elections. As we know, the threats of misinformation and such come from countless sources. Foreign actors seeking to create disruption and discord in our elections, those using falsehoods to intentionally lead voters astray for political gain, and frankly, everyday people who perhaps innocently repost or repeat a piece of unverified or false news. The same amazing technology tools that make our life better and easier with instant access to the world's information also give rise to the old adage, a lie can make it around the world before the truth can get its pants on. Now, I know that's an old adage and probably dates me terribly. But the Chamber's pollster, Richard Schuba of the Glenn Gariff Group, has said that we do now live in an era of misinformation. Some quick highlights include 60% of Michigan voters report they're doing the same, if not better financially, than prior to the pandemic, but 60% of voters also believe economic conditions are weak. 68% are dissatisfied with the condition of democracy in America, with equal percentages of fingers pointing to the other party. 17% believe it doesn't matter if American government is a democracy or not. And even more chilling, 5% believe that violence is acceptable if their candidate loses the election. That would translate to about 17 million Americans who believe this. Our discussion today are two guests that I'm exceptionally proud to welcome. While Brad Smith, Vice Chair and President of Microsoft, had hoped and planned to join us, but currently, literally, he's in the back of a car in New York City traffic because of President Biden's visit to the UN General Assembly. But stepping in, we are exceptionally fortunate to have Ginny Badanes of Microsoft. Ginny leads Democracy Forward, an initiative within Microsoft's technology and corporate responsibility team that is focused on addressing the ongoing challenges to the stability of democracies, not just in America, but globally. The program includes efforts to protect elections, political parties, campaigns, and NGOs from actions that would undermine democracy. This work includes Microsoft's journalism program, which is focused on combating disinformation, expanding news distribution, increasing media literacy, and working with community-based programs and newsrooms to use technology to expand their reach. Ginny spent her career at the intersection of politics and technology. Before joining Microsoft in 2014, she was Vice President of Political at CMDI, where she advised presidential and Senate candidates on their efforts to leverage data and technology to improve their finance and treasury operations. Ginny was recently named to Washingtonian's Most Influential People list for national security and defense. She's a graduate of Duke University and lives in my old hometown of Arlington, Virginia, with her husband and boys. Our next guest needs no introduction whatsoever to this audience or any audience in Michigan. Our friend, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, is a national leader on election security and ensuring a healthy democracy. She has been celebrated by pro-democracy advocates across the nation and is working with her Secretary of State peers of both parties across the nation to ensure the 2024 election improves on America's already strong track record of fair, accurate, and secure elections, and that all eligible voters have the opportunity to vote and those votes counted. The Chamber is proud to be an inaugural member of Secretary Benson's Michigan Business United for Elections, which brings business leaders into this conversation, using the bully pulpit we have as business leaders to reinforce our faith in the election process and its outcomes, and the role that we have to inform those that we can reach on what people's voting options are and to encourage our employees to volunteer to be election workers. These issues are important to business because business and the free market can only flourish in a stable society where people have faith in their elections. It is now my great pleasure to turn the program over to Secretary Benson and Ginny Badanes of Microsoft.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you to the entire Detroit Chamber for hosting this important conversation. We know that a healthy democracy requires, or healthy economy requires a healthy democracy. And that's why I've been grateful to see business leaders all across the state of Michigan joining with our department to ensure that no matter where someone lives or who they decide to vote for, that they know who to turn to for trusted information about our elections. And indeed, with so much designed to sow seeds of doubt in this process, we know transparency is our friend and knowledge is our friend. And when it comes to in this next month or month and a half, as people begin voting in our state, we know that as turnout progresses, efforts to discourage participation or cause citizens to hear so much noise that they just give up altogether is greater potential than ever before. And that's where business leaders come in, trying to cut through the noise and simply with data and information and transparency, help citizens know what to believe in this era of misinformation. New to this era this year is artificial intelligence. It's a technology that is new and it's advancing quicker than lawmakers can keep up. Although in Michigan, we have passed laws to ban the intentionally deceptive use of AI to create deep fakes or other types of imagery that would deceive intentionally individuals, voters, about how to vote, where to vote, or where candidates stand. So we know that that tool, along with the requirement that any AI created media that regarding elections must have a disclaimer attached to it or a watermark or disclosure, will help empower citizens to be critical consumers of information in the weeks ahead. But at the same time, we know that bad actors are going to take advantage of this new technology. And so for that reason, I'm grateful to have representation from Microsoft here today. And again, we're sorry Brad is stuck in traffic, but Ginny, grateful for you to step in at such late notice and join us to, and we've had many conversations before leading up to this point. I'm very grateful for your leadership in positioning Microsoft and the tech industry as a partner for good in informing voters and combating the negative impacts of AI-driven misinformation in particular. So I was hoping we could start with any suggestions you have for those seeking to mitigate the impacts of AI-driven misinformation on our elections and what you're seeing from your vantage point with Microsoft.
Sure. Thank you, Secretary, and thank you to the Chamber for having me. Again, apologies for the last minute change, but I figured if anyone can roll with the punches and changes, that would be an election official, since that is essentially what you all are set up to do, to be flexible and roll with changes. Look, as we look at the advances of AI, one of the things we have been really focused on is where it's going to be disruptive. Where do we think that this powerful technology, which brings with it so much opportunity, and we're really excited about the potential of AI in things like democracy, but where are we seeing potential harms? And of course, as we look at the election environment, particularly here in the US, there's a lot of concern that it can be used by bad actors to deceive the public about maybe what a candidate said or something about a ballot location and or a voting location. And that's unacceptable. And so there's a lot of things people can do, but it kind of depends on your role. So there's a role for industry, those who are on the AI company side, the tech industry side. We have an obligation to do things like prevent, essentially preventing nation states from exploiting our products in order to deceive the public. We have a obligation to protect, whether that's candidates or election officials, or the voting public. We have a variety of trainings that we do. We have incident response plans we share with others because we have a role in protecting those stakeholders, and then and prepare, which really leads to, I think, the question of the voting public, the general public. What can they do as these advances roll out? And as you note, government at the federal level has not quite put the legislation in place. We are grateful for states like Michigan who have put in some regulatory frameworks around this. But given that we are, I'm sure you have the dates, 42 days, 41 days from the general election, it's important that citizens be prepared for this. And so some ways that we have recommendations on that are things like, and this is going to sound pretty obvious to those of you on this call, I think, look for the authoritative sources. We've been working on a public awareness campaign called Check, Recheck, Vote, which is essentially trying to get people to think twice, just as you would with any information you see online, but particularly because we know AI can be really effective at persuading people. Essentially, check the source, go to the trusted source, make sure you're looking to your election officials, make sure you're looking to those in your community who you can trust to send accurate information before you send something further or before you change your behavior in any way, particularly when it comes to voting. So in many ways, the same lessons that we've all been preaching, Secretary Benson, you especially, around how people receive information about voting, that's really the same even in this era of AI.
That's really helpful, and helpful to know that in some ways AI just creates more opportunities for bad actors to spread misinformation, but the solution, pre-bunking, trusted sources, remains the same. In Michigan, we've already seen AI being used to mislead voters, and I know you've tracked this all around the country. Could you share some best practices as you just kind of went through? But when a citizen sees AI, and AI generated information, what could they specifically do? Should they report it? Should they try to post it with correct information? What are some of the specific things you recommend people do when responding to AI that is deceptive or intentionally misleading?
So I'll start by acknowledging that identifying that kind of content is really hard. And that goes back to the obligations, I think, in large part on the tech companies to make that easier on consumers. Right now, there is a standard called content provenance that is out there where when companies generate AI or when their products generate AI images, videos, audio files, it should be stamped with something that could create a label so that when you're online, you see a label that this is AI generated. And that's moving in the right direction. But I'll be honest, we're not there yet. When you go online, it is not clear when you see an image or a video whether that was AI generated or not. And so, because that definition is not yet there, it does go back to a healthy skepticism of what you're seeing online, particularly if it's trying to influence you. And so, again, the same sort of general guidance that has been provided in the past around mis and disinformation still applies here, which is essentially if you see something that gives you a very emotional reaction, or if you see something that is really just like directly into a narrative that you're already inclined to believe and reinforces it, before assuming it's true or before passing it on, just take a moment to ask, could this have been AI generated? We have a couple of tools for what you do if you're not sure. One is I'll actually start back and say we have a quiz that we've put out, which is kind of fun. It's called Real or Not, and we'll try and distribute that if we can, where you can go online and see images that some have been generated by AI and some are authentic. And it's in part to show it's really hard. The technology's gotten so good. It's really hard to tell the difference. So that's one thing that you can do, either share it with your friends or others, in case people think that they can on their own with their own eyes detect AI. But the next thing is reporting. So if you believe that you've seen something that is a deep fake of a candidate or of an election official or of an election related scenario, know where you can go to report. And there are a couple ways to do that. In fact, just last week, together with a bunch of the other technology companies who we've been working with on this issue, we put together a reporting links site where we all kind of collected our different reporting links and made it available in a single location. So while you can't report it in one place and we all share it across companies because we all have different policies, we have created a place where you can go find a lot of our different reporting links. So Microsoft has a link where if you believe there's a deep fake of a candidate or an election scenario, you can report it. And we will do forensics and then take action as appropriate and share it with the appropriate authorities as well. A lot of the other companies have similar policies. So just sort of be cognizant of what you're seeing. If you think and you're not sure, check an authoritative source. And then if it's something that you think is reportable because it violates policies or you believe it might be AI generated and deceptive, go to one of these reporting links and report it to the proper organization or company.
That's really helpful. For many of the business leaders who are here today, do you have any additional advice for how they could both prepare and respond from a company standpoint, or with employees or customers who look to them for information?
Sure. And one thing that is so interesting is as we see trust across institutions globally in decline, one area that people continue to trust is their employer. And I'm sure those of you who own or run businesses are cognizant of this. People still trust the organization that they work for. And so with that comes some responsibility, I think. One of the things that we look at as kind of a case study is how we all kind of societally got to a place where we understood that we might be receiving a phishing email and that we didn't click on the phishing link, right? And ask ourselves, how did we get there as a society? Because we weren't there 10 years ago, 15 years ago. People were sending money to Nigerian princes all the time, right? How did we get to a place where we were a little more resilient as a society? And there's a lot that goes into that, but one of the key factors is that employers were having trainings and were pushing out information to their employees about it. And of course, there was a business risk if their employees clicked on those links. But nonetheless, we've seen the power of what an employer can do when they communicate and train their employees. And so, one of the things we do at Microsoft is think a lot about our own employees and how we can help them be more civically engaged and civically aware. And some of the things that we've done, and happy to talk to you all individually if anyone has questions or would want to pursue a similar program. But one of the things we do is we make tools available to our employees, really basic things for how they can be engaged. We make sure they know how and where to register to vote. We make sure that they have all the details on their rights within our company if they have time off. And of course, this is going to be different place to place based on the state rules and whatnot. We make sure they know and are equipped to go vote, because frankly, that's the most important thing I think that we can do as an employer is make sure our employees understand the importance of that. But then we also do awareness trainings around the threat of deepfake. And I'll take a moment here to actually give a separate business case reason for why that's important. While it's very important for us as participants in our own civic environment to be aware of true information and know how to make sure that we're voting, et cetera, what is also important is making sure that we don't fall for deepfakes that could lead to corporate fraud. And so I recognize it's a slightly different topic, but the training mechanisms behind it are the same, which is essentially you do not want one of your employees to be misled by a deepfake into doing something that creates issues for you as a company. And that's another area we've been exploring as well, as we see financial fraud leveraging these tools on the rise as well. So these are some of the tools you can equip your employees with: trainings and more information, make sure they're more civically engaged and involved. This is not a political issue. Whether or not who you vote for is not what we're going for. It's more making sure people know what tools they have access to and how to get to the ballot box.
That's really helpful and great to have those specific tools for business leaders and us as individuals to have. I know that over 20 major tech companies, including Google and Meta and OpenAI and X, or formerly Twitter, and also TikTok, have pledged to prevent AI from being used deceptively to interfere in our elections. I know you've been a central piece of bringing that together. How much do you think that's actually going to help us as we head into these next 7 weeks, protect citizens and customers and consumers against AI being used deceptively to interfere with elections?
I think we've already started to see some of the fruits of that effort, which hopefully helps us as we get this close to the US election. This is an effort that we started at the beginning of the year, where in large part it was a matter of getting large tech companies, particularly those involved in AI, interestingly, those who are both on the origination of AI side, so OpenAI, Anthropic, as you mentioned, and then also those on the distribution side, so obviously X and TikTok, getting all sides of this to come together and acknowledge that this is going to be impactful in some way around our democracy, and that we as technology companies have responsibilities. So it was large part about getting the entire industry to step forward and acknowledge the role and responsibilities that we play. But then, of course, the proof is in the pudding, right? What did we actually do out of that? We had 8 commitments that we all collectively made that basically bucketed into things like prevention, as I mentioned before, detection, policies and transparency, as well as societal resilience. And these were all areas that we acknowledged were important in trying to get us to a place where we're a more resilient society and we have better products so that people can vote without interference from AI or from nation states. And so, as far as how it impacts us towards the US election, I'll note that a lot of the companies have actually followed through on many of those commitments, including things like labeling AI content better. Again, not perfect. We're not all the way there yet. But I do think these kinds of cross-industry efforts where we agree with the general outcome we're working towards and pushing each other to do more will create a better information environment as we get towards the elections. Not a perfect one, and we still have a lot of work to do. But I do think that we got ourselves a little bit closer to our objective and where we're trying to go.
That's encouraging. And I think from the information environment standpoint, are there benefits of AI to help better inform citizens about where to vote or early voting or other different options in voting, or even after the polls close, how to ascertain or expect the results of the election, to the unofficial results, to be prepared and available? Are there benefits of AI in that regard? And do they, can they outweigh the harms?
It's such a great question. And it's so funny in the work that I do, I tend to be like so much in the threat area of like, where are all the harms? But it's really important to remember that there are so many opportunities here. So some of the ways that we've seen this used, I'll start on sort of the campaign side of things. We've actually seen political campaigns very responsibly use this technology to improve things like outreach to voters, and making sure that their stakeholders are getting more information, that they understand the policies of the candidate. This can be translated, of course, into election departments as well, particularly when you're in an environment where you have lots of different languages spoken. I would say the translation capabilities of AI are really promising as far as making sure that somebody feels like they're getting a message directly intended for them. Not to flip to the dark side again, but we recognize that that same technology can be used, of course, to send misinformation and disinformation to people in their native language as well. So we always need to see both sides of that coin. But there is really a lot of opportunity for this kind of technology to improve the way that we communicate and the way that we produce elections and the way that we do our productivity work around them. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But we're, of course, staying vigilant to where we see the harms going as well.
Yeah, I think the both sides of the positives and the negative can give us great insights into the path forward and how we can use this both as a win to make democracy and access to information stronger, while also protecting against the challenges. Looking forward now over the next 7 weeks and beyond, are you filled with more optimism around this emerging technology, or trepidation?
I'm absolutely filled with more optimism. I'll say this is an area that, frankly, as we went into this global election cycle, the US kind of caps off a year of global elections where billions of people have voted. And there's been a lot of concern about how AI may be used, particularly by adversaries, to disrupt that process. And the good news is that it doesn't look like it's been super impactful yet. And I should be knocking on all of the wood around me. Because the reality is we still have some time left in this election, not to mention the days and weeks following the election where we could still see this activity. But I'm optimistic that we've seen more use of this technology in a positive way in this space than we have in a negative way. But again, I always say that with a heavy dose of vigilance, that just because we haven't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not coming. So we are going to stay on top of it and be looking for what could happen. But I'm mostly optimistic. I think that we haven't seen sort of the worst of what we were expecting, and we've seen a lot of positive use cases, many of which we hadn't even thought of ourselves, where people have been really innovative and creative with their uses of the tech.
That's really great and really helpful and encouraging. Well, thank you, Ginny, for stepping in for Brad today and being here with us. I really appreciate all this information and grateful for the Detroit Chamber for making it available to all of your members across Southeast Michigan. And to underscore that where we started, and thank you again, Sandy, for kicking us off. A strong economy requires a strong democracy. And a strong democracy requires citizens have clarity and to cut through the noise, confidence in our elections, and certainty as well about the sanctity and integrity of the process. And so really, business leaders, as you all know, can play a critical role in ensuring that clarity and confidence and certainty is felt by not just those within your purview and your employees and customers, but citizens all around the state of Michigan. So I'm grateful for those who have joined with us in the Michigan Business United for Elections initiative, and we hope that will help provide business leaders and others with information on how to be a part of team democracy in this moment. It's a nonpartisan team that is simply just working to make sure citizens have access to trusted information and are able to be critical consumers of that information as the noise and potential use of AI or other types of information are used to sow seeds of doubt in our election processes in the weeks ahead. So I hope everyone here and business leaders throughout Michigan can be a part of this initiative, and we can work together to not only survive this moment in our elections and also ensure that our democracy becomes stronger through the partnerships that we develop into the future. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you to the Detroit Chamber for hosting this important conversation, and thank you to Microsoft for joining us and coming to Michigan to help share some of your knowledge, Ginny, and others of what you've done to really research and be a global leader in helping us as election officials and business leaders utilize AI in positive ways and protect against its misuse in negative ways.